Today's show takes a look at some cut or trade candidates for the Broncos as they get ready for NFL free agency. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown. Matthew Peterson here with 10 players the Broncos could move on from to clear up some cap space. Now, a good primer, a good foundation I want to lay down before we look at any names is why would the Broncos make some moves, right? Well, they've only got 5 picks in the upcoming NFL draft. So if George and Sean Payton decide to move on from some veteran players to try and get some assets back, that's one reason. Another reason is, at the bottom, you'll see the Broncos currently only have $9 million in cap space. That number is going to go up. They are going to move on from some people we'll talk about in today's show to get some more money to spend in free agency. So, without further ado, let's jump off with our first name. It's a big name. It's Courtland Sutton. This would not be a cut candidate. This would be a trade candidate, okay? I think there is a very real chance that a Courtland Sutton trade does go down. After Russell Wilson, Sutton has the team's second highest cap hit at $18.2 million. That's a lot of money going to a player that, truth be told, has not lived up to the extension he has gotten. He signed a 4-year extension worth $68 million, I believe, back in November of 2021, and he simply has not delivered. Now, we'll look at some stats in just a second, but why Courtland Sutton? Well, Matthew Berry from the NFL Combine was talking with some folks, had some insiders, and here's what he reported on following the Combine. As long as we are talking Denver, I'm told the Broncos are quietly shopping Courtland Sutton. Not actively pushing him, but definitely trying to see if there's a trade market for him, and if they get a decent offer, would move him. Now, going back to Courtland Sutton's statistical standpoint, post-extension, right, the last 22 games following that 4-year extension he signed in the middle of the 2021 season, I've said this before. If you've watched the show before, you've seen this graphic before, but just 2 touchdowns in 22 games, it's simply not acceptable, right? That's not what you're paying him to do. There's a lot of reasons. He has missed some time. He's had some injuries. He has not had good quarterback play in his defense. But at the end of the day, when you look at the finances behind it, there's a good chunk of change that could be saved by moving on from Sutton. If the Broncos were to trade him before June 1st, well, that $14 million base salary would be picked up by another team. Denver would have $6.7 million in cap savings, a dead cap hit of $11.4 million. This is not a move I think the Broncos would make just to solely free up cap space. This would be a move to get some cap space. $6.7 million can sign a starting player, but also get some draft assets back, right? Get some more day 2, early day 3 picks out of Sutton. So predict it for me. Will Courtland Sutton get traded? Yes or no? I'm leaning towards yes. If I had to pick one side or the other, I think it's more likely than unlikely at this point that Sutton does get dealt. All right, our next candidate to either get cut or traded is offensive tackle Garett Bolles, the left tackle for this team, who I think has a decent shot of potentially being moved. So he's rumored to be on the trading block. He was rumored to be on the trading block earlier this offseason, and he too has an expensive price tag, right? He's got a $17.8 million cap hit. That's 4th highest on the team. Now, he's got 2 years remaining on his contract, so any team picking him up would not be looking at a guy who's a lame duck left tackle, right, so to speak, of just 1 year left on his deal. Now, before we get any further into talking about Garett Bolles, we've got an awesome new sponsor that I'm really excited to share with you guys, and that is Fume. So today's Broncos Breakdown is sponsored by Fume. We all have bad habits, and we certainly know how hard they can be to kick those bad habits. Our sponsor, Fume, is on a mission to accelerate humanity's breakup from the bad habits that consume far too many of us. Fume is a natural diffusive device that uses plants and behavioral science to help you trade out your negative habit for a positive one. I personally didn't expect a whole lot out of Fume when the guys here at Chat Sports got it, but the minty sensation is very powerful and very popular. Also, they got this awesome thing called the Journey Pack. Now, the Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors. That's crisp mint, maple pepper, and white cranberry. And here you can see the product in my hand. It's not big. It's lightweight. It's very easy to have in your pocket or wherever. So, Fume is not a vape. It's a non-electronic device designed to transform your negative habits. The easiest way to stop a bad habit is to switch to a positive one, and Fume is designed perfectly to do just that. Head to tryfume.com/chatsports and use code chatsports to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com/chatsports and use code chatsports to save an additional 10% off on your order today. That link's in the comments and the description of today's show. Getting back to the Garett Bolles segment of the show, looking at the finances behind dealing him before June 1st, that $13.7 million base salary would be picked up by any team, so that's not a huge number for a team to stomach. The dead cap hit, it's only $8 million. That's not a whole lot. And nearly $10 million in cap savings. Similar to Courtland Sutton, I think this would be a deal that really checks 3 boxes, actually. You get some draft assets back. I think you could get a second-round pick for Garett Bolles. So, very much needed some more draft capital. Number 2, you do free up some cap space. Nearly $10 million. That can sign you 1, maybe even 2 starters, potentially. And number 3, it's just 2 players that, in my opinion, have not lived up to the big contract extensions that they received. I like Garett Bolles. Left tackle is a cornerstone piece for a team. But hand up, I don't view Garett Bolles as a franchise left tackle. The penalties, the holding calls, I feel like they've only gone down for him because they call it less, right? I don't think he's actually gotten miles and miles better than where he was at the start of his career. I've never been a crazy big Garett Bolles fan, so if a team can offer the Broncos a second rounder, I would do it. So before we get to the next cut or trade candidate on the show, help us reach our next milestone here at the channel. We are 152 subs away from reaching 12,500 subs. Help us reach that goal before free agency really kicks off. Hit that sub button for the best Broncos free agency coverage out there. Let's rattle off some more notable trade/cut candidates. KJ Hamler, I think, would be a trade candidate. They're not going to cut him because you're not going to save a whole lot by cutting him. But trade-wise, I could see him getting dealt, right? If another team views KJ Hamler as a diamond in their rough and he's got some bad injuries early on in his career, but they still see that second-round potential in him and they want to offer the Broncos, I don't know, a little bit more than just a bag of footballs, I could see the Broncos doing it. Next guy up is Ronald Darby. I think this could be a trade or a cut candidate. He kind of fits both spots. Darby, who's been in Denver for 2 seasons now, has been good, but he's only played 16 games in 2 seasons. That's missing a combined full season over 2 years. It's a little bit disappointing. No interceptions, 9 pass breakups. I think the stats are mediocre, and that's somewhat fine because you're not paying him to be a CB1, right? I don't think he was brought in with that expectation. Remember, he was brought in alongside Kyle Fuller, who a lot of people thought would be the second cornerback on this team. But regardless, the cap savings for Ronald Darby, they're pretty big. $9.6 million, only a $3 million dead cap hit. If Denver doesn't think he's going to bounce back strong from that ACL injury, they could ultimately release him. Moving on to another cut candidate, and this one I don't like. Josey Jewell. I think it was the guys at DNVR talking about this today. I don't want to move on from Josey Jewell. Josey Jewell was one of the most consistent pieces of this defense last year, despite missing some time, which really shows you how impactful he was when he was on the field, right? His debut, remember he missed the first couple of weeks of the calf injury. He came on the scene, exploded for a couple of sacks with it. Now, his cap hit is $7.1 million. I think that's worth paying, right? I think that's fine to have on your books because outside of him, who are you going to start a linebacker, right? Alex Singleton's a free agent. You could bring him back, but if you bring him back, sure, then you're going to be paying him similar-ish to what Jewell's getting paid, so it's not like a huge amount of savings right there. Jonas Griffith is a free agent. Who else is there? I think you should keep Josey Jewell. I would not cut Jewell. Now, another fan favorite, if you will, to get cut potentially is Brandon McManus. See, The thing with McManus is he's coming off a bit of a down season. When you look at his stats from 2022, we'll put some kicker stats on the screen. 77% field goal percentage. That's just not ideal, right? He was towards the bottom of the league. He had some bad misses. He also had some misses that weren't his fault, like Hackett tossing him out there for a 78-yard field goal attempt in week 1. Now, you could save $2.5 million if you moved on from number 8. So would you do that? Personally, I'm torn on it because I'm not in love with holding on to a kicker that didn't play that well last season. I'll tell you this much. If you're cutting McManus, it shouldn't be for the cap savings. Why? Sure, you cut him. You save $2.5 million. But you have to sign another kicker, and he's not going to be free. So you can get a rookie kicker potentially, which is scary, and you're going to pay that rookie kicker around $750,000, $800,000, the minimum for a rookie. So then when you deduct that from $2.5 million, you're looking at about $1.5-ish million in savings. Is that really worth it? If you want to move on from him because he's exiting his prime, that I can get behind. But for the savings, I wouldn't do it. Now, one guy I would move on to save some money is Graham Glasgow. So the offensive guy, utility man, he filled in a bunch of spots, and he did a good job of filling in for Cushenberry, I thought, this past season, or stepping in wherever he was needed. But look at the cap savings you can get by moving on from him before June 1st, $11 million. That's the type of move you make for a more or less backup offensive lineman to get up to $20 million in cap space because you're currently at $9 million. You don't pay someone, you don't have a $14 million cap hit for a player that's not even starting on your team. He's going to be gone. Now, our next cut candidate is in a similar boat to Glasgow of, I think he's Audi 500, right? Chase Edmonds, he was a very quiet member, a very quiet piece of that Bradley Chubb trade. Most people forgot about him because he got hurt immediately when he came to Denver. But Chase Edmonds, his cap hit in 2023 is $5.9 million. Nearly $6 million for a running back that doesn't appear to be in the plans for the Broncos moving forward. That's just too much savings. Also, look what he did last year. I mean, he didn't get much touches, but 245 yards, 2 touchdowns, $6 million of a cap hit. Yeah, that's not going to stick around. Now let's move on to our 9th cut candidate / trade. This is Mike Purcell. Mike Purcell, we discussed a lot last season as a potential surprise trade candidate. Never really came to fruition, but I think it could this year, along with Jacob Martin. Remember, that's the guy that Denver traded for like 45 minutes after trading Bradley Chubb away. He did nothing for the Broncos, more or less. He's going to be a great name-a-random Broncos player in 10 years. Both of these guys you could save in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 million. I mean, look at this list right here. Ignore McManus. If you move on from the bottom 4 right there, Graham, Edmonds, Purcell, Martin, that's 4, 8, 14, $25 million right there, give or take a couple $100,000, some rough napkin math right in front of the camera. $25 million for 4 players that are not starting. Yeah, I think most, if not all, those guys will be on new teams in 2023. So we looked at 10 names today. Who would you say you are most comfortable, most confident in stating that they will be cut or traded, right? Who is the guy that you'll jump in and say, yep, there's a 100% chance that he will not be with the Broncos in 2023? Let me know in the comment section below. The easy one out is like a Chase Edmonds or a Glasgow, but I'm pretty confident that Courtland Sutton will get traded. So tentatively put me there. I'm a bit of a coward because I won't fully commit to it just yet because he is a pretty notable name and a good chunk and a good piece of this offense.